We're a couple of minutes in and we've got a lot to get through today. So even though we've got a few more still joining us, I think we should probably make a start. So Anne, I'll hand over to you to get the session started.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much. And remember, those polls, we want you to listen to this in a relaxed kind of way, but not that relaxed. First, who am I? I'm Anne Ashworth, property finance and finance journalist, and I'm going to be your chair this evening. And we can promise you an evening of telling you like it is about what's happening in the property market now. This week, we've had the news of the vaccine, which has cheered us all up. And since it's reopening in May, the property market has performed in a much more lively way than anybody could ever have forecast. Yet there are big challenges ahead, both for the jobs market and the property market. We're going to be running through every single aspect of this, but first you want to know who you're going to be discussing it with. So let me go over to our panelists and get them to tell you a little bit about themselves. First, Lawrence Bowles, tell us all about yourself.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lawrence. I am a director in the residential research team at Savills. It is my job to try and make sense of what on earth is going on, and either bravely or perhaps foolishly try to forecast what will happen next.
And over to you, Danny. Tell us who you are and where you are.
And good evening, everybody. My name's Danny Rowland. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for Berkeley St Edward, and I am currently at Eden Grove, which is one of my developments in Staines-upon-Thames, which we're highlighting in today's presentation.
And is that the scheme that we see behind you on that backdrop, Danny?
That's correct. That's where we're sitting at the moment. Myself, Lisa, and Lawrence are all sunning ourselves on the beauties of Staines-upon-Thames.
Well, it's a very, very historic place. I've been reading up on it today, and the Romans settled there. It had one of the very first bridges across the river. It's a place that people possibly underestimate. Now, we've got 45 minutes. We're going to be answering your questions, but we've got three main topics of discussion tonight. And the first of these is the outlook for the market. What's happening now? What lies ahead? And in order to give us a great macro picture of that, I'm going to first pass to Lawrence, and then I'm going to go to Danny to give us the view from, well, it's not really the cold face, is it more the marketing suite of a major developer? So, Lawrence, what's happening out there and what could lie ahead?
Fabulous, thanks, Anne. Well, it will not have escaped your attention that while the last few months have been a bit of a struggle in both for us all personally, but also for the economy, there has been some optimism very recently with the development of a widely effective coronavirus vaccine. So while the economy has been struggling over the last few months, we do have some level of optimism to look forward to. If we're looking at what's likely to have an impact on the housing market, however, the big impact is likely to come from unemployment figures rather than those GDP numbers that we've been hearing about. There, we would still expect to see an increase in unemployment over the next few months. And so in the short term, we would expect to see some caution tempering appetite in the market, some caution from mortgage lenders in particular. Counter to that, you've got Rishi Sunak introducing a stamp duty holiday. And so in the short term, appetite is very strong. People looking to beat that March 31st deadline. Through the second part of 2021, we could see a slightly more challenging market as those unemployment figures grow. But beyond that point, we've got the prospect of a vaccine, low interest rates, and things looking a lot more positive from there on out.
Now, Lawrence, like everybody else in the property world, I follow your Twitter, and one of the things that you were tweeting about today are the delays currently happening in the property market as a result of delay of surveys, decisions on mortgages. Now, you were beginning to raise the possibility of the Chancellor extending that stamp duty holiday. Could you fill us in a bit more on that?
So, of course, we've got the stamp duty holiday that's due to end on the 31st of March. a lot of people rushing back into the market. The number of sales agreed subject to contract running way above this time last year, or indeed any normal time in the market. But mortgage lenders, mortgage valuation panels, conveyancing solicitors do not have the capacity to deal with that number of applications, certainly when they're working from home or when some of their staff are still furloughed. So we've seen the time it takes to go from having agreed an offer to completing extend over the last few months, and that's not likely to reduce over the next few months without some really significant changes. So that's what's causing these transactions to become delayed. I suspect any moves to delay the end of that stamp duty holiday are going to be limited. The Chancellor faces an extreme amount of pressure to get the public accounts back into the black, back into positive territory. With talk of various taxes being levied elsewhere, the idea of giving more tax away in the form of stamp duty seems unlikely, but you can potentially, it's more reasonable perhaps to expect those people who've already exchanged, or those people who have been delayed specifically because of coronavirus related delays, maybe there could be an exemption for those buyers in particular.
Thank you for that. Now, we're going to hear from Danny about what it's really like out there. Danny, how do you sense the market is performing? It's much more lively than we expected, but do you see this continuing? And what is the sense that you have of the mood amongst buyers, the people who are coming to have a look at your properties?
It's really interesting, actually, because you've got three distinct markets that we're working to at the moment. So you've got the UK investor market, which is actually having a little bit of a resurgence. Over the last 18 months, I've seen the UK market completely disappear, but definitely over the last 2 to 3 months, there's a lot more interest coming out of the UK market because it's cheap to borrow money, because rental returns are on the increase, and I think a lot of people are seeing no return for their investments sitting in banks at the moment. So from that perspective, there's a big driver from that market coming back in resurgence. And I think also the stamp duty holiday and the fact that a lot of people have been cooped up during the lockdown has kind of exaggerated that situation. We've also got the owner-occupier market, which is constantly there. The sites that I deal with, predominantly outside London, I look after 3 schemes, which are a mixture of houses and apartments. There is always a market there. People are looking to move, whether that's for schooling, larger houses, for business, and even more so after the lockdown, people just looking for more bang for their buck. They're not having to go into work as much. They're working from home, therefore they need a dedicated space to work and base themselves, which is not evolved around the children, and also looking for more outside space. So that actually has a key driver for us post-lockdown lift. And what we saw was 2 micro booms, one post-lockdown immediately, and then the second one coming into play when the stamp duty holiday was announced. In the last couple of weeks, though, we've definitely seen a decrease in customers thinking about taking that commitment. What did happen with the stamp duty holiday announcement, it pushed a lot of people onto the market thinking about moving, and it kind of saturated the market to a certain extent with a lot of properties on there. So where customers would only have a few or a handful to choose from, they've now got a lot more selection to be able to pick from that cherry pick pack to select from. Ultimately, though, that is making that decision process a lot longer. And when you factor in what Lawrence was touching on in terms of the banks and solicitors taking longer, that whole transaction now is taking considerably longer than what it would have done 12 months ago.
Danny, people's priorities have really changed, haven't they? They want outdoor space. They're not so bothered about the length of the commute. Do you see that as being an almost permanent change that has happened in the way we want to live and where we want to live, or do you see it as a temporary phenomenon?
I think that my initial feelings on it were it was going to be a blip, and that it wasn't going to be for too long. However, the more you look at businesses and their ethoses, with Berkeley's coming out and saying a lot of their staff can work from home, and speaking to a lot of my friends that own their own companies, they're now specifically looking to shut down their main head offices, decant their external staff, which are not required as much, and therefore working or being close to where you work is less of a priority anymore. And it means that people can push that a little bit further out and get a lot more for their money.
So you think that we've really changed as a nation? What we value in a home is not what we valued even 12 months ago?
Massively, yes. And we have seen
that.
Sorry, Lawrence.
Just to chip in, I think a lot of this depends on life stage or age group. And yes, there's definitely, there will be a resurgence of cities. Cities are far from dead, and particularly those younger people, those people who are earlier on in their careers, particularly, if we're being a little bit frank, people who are still single. There are few places that are better for meeting lots of other potential job opportunities or potential dating opportunities than cities. So that's demand is still going to be there. For those more settled families who are a bit more settled down, they've perhaps been weighing up the compromise between, okay, do I want to take a longer commute in order to get more space, maybe more of a garden, move to somewhere with slightly better access to schools? What this experience of the pandemic has done is shift that balance towards that. And I think that change is likely to be a long-term one for those more secure, more settled households.
It's really interesting, actually, because a lot of our developments now, we have been doing for the last 10 years, putting workspace and dedicated co-working areas for people to be able to utilise. And to be brutally honest, they haven't been that well used to date. However, over the last 12 months, that's become so much more of a focus for everybody that now people are looking for those areas to specifically be there. So the Eden Grove development, for example, has retail on the development, has commercial. So if you wanted to have an office space, you can have it within your own development. And it also has co-working area, which is for everybody on the development to be able to utilise and host meetings or just come out of your home space to feel like you're in a workspace mentality.
So what you're saying is you're working towards what this ideal of the 15-minute city, where everything that you need to do in your life, the shops, schools, work, is within an easy walk or cycle ride of your home. And in fact, what you're providing is on site, and also a huge amount of support. If you are working by yourself in your apartment or in your home, it can be very lonely. Great to be able to go out and meet other residents and spark off their ideas. Now, I'm very aware that all this is hugely interesting, but we've only got 45 minutes, and so I really need to press on to our second topic. But what Lisa, who's keeping us all in order tonight, is going to do is show you the results of our first poll, if we have those. Lisa, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question we asked you is, what is your property investment experience? We're interested to see the group we had joining us today. So 42% of our audience today are interested in investing for the first time. 46% have bought property before, and 12% have a portfolio of investment properties. So a real mix there, actually, of attendees tonight.
That's really great. So we're really talking to the whole breadth of buyers and sellers. Very interesting. Thank you for that, Lisa. Can I just say out there, Lisa really got us very well organized here. If we look a bit worried, it's because we know we've got to please Lisa this evening. Now, our second topic is buying as an investor or as an owner-occupier. Now, I'm going to go over first to Lawrence on this one. Do you suspect that people will still want to invest in property as buy-to-let investors as much as they have done in the past, or have all the successive changes to the tax laws really put them off that? And do we see coming into an era where the owner-occupier buyer is predominant in the market? Lawrence, what's your view on that?
I think it's sitting on the fence again, as I'm so wont to do. The balance has shifted. We're not seeing the end or the predominance of any particular buyer type. As you mentioned, we've seen a whole raft of new tax measures put into place over the last few governments, including less tax relief for landlords, for higher income tax rate paying landlords, the additional stamp duty surcharge for additional homes, of course. That's all made it a bit more difficult for those buy-to-let landlords, particularly those mortgaged buy-to-let landlords, to turn a profit. Having said that, there are very few ways to invest certainly in a bank account or in a cash account or savings account that will provide you with any kind of interest whatsoever. So from that sense, buy-to-let offers you a way of investing that gives you a tangible asset that you can see, you can feel, that does provide you with that kind of return. Albeit potentially you are accumulating those returns in the equity in the property rather than paying out in cash. I think the key thing to remember with the buy-to-let is that it's not just a bond, it's somebody's home. And so if you're willing to put in the work to manage the property effectively or pay somebody to manage the property effectively, then great, that's a fantastic move. If you are looking for something that just sits there quietly and makes money, it may not be the right choice, but I'm sure there'll be experienced investors here who are already very familiar with that.
It's very interesting what you say there about if you are investing in a property, you are providing somebody with a home. And the people that do it best and actually make the best returns are the people who are very aware of their legal obligations and run it like a business. Trying to do it as a hobby is a really bad idea because people don't seem to realize just legal and other responsibilities if you're a landlord. If you can wake up to those, you can make it work for you. Now, Danny, coming round to see your schemes at the moment, who would you say is in the majority? Is it owner-occupiers, investors, or is there a balance between them?
There's a balance between them, and like Lawrence said, it will depend on where the development's located. So I look after 5 different schemes, 2 inside London and 3 outside London. Predominantly the outside London schemes are more of a house and provision, so therefore it's more geared towards the owner-occupiers. However, we are seeing a lot more investors now looking at homes or second homes from overseas customers, which is quite an interesting market, which we haven't seen previously. And that's been driven by the Hong Kong announcement that happened with the passports and that decision that's coming through. So that's a key driver, definitely for us. Going back to what I touched on earlier, though, the owner-occupier market's always going to be there. People will always need to upscale, downscale, move left, move right, whatever is important to them in that period of their life. And therefore, the fact that we've got a plethora of schemes, 62 currently active across the region, there should be something for everybody across our developments that we build. But the market is still very much stable. I mean, as a developer, we were one of the only ones to continue building during the lockdown process, and we continued operating as a business. And that lockdown obviously had a slowdown on the delivery of product because we had to work within the confines of ensuring that everyone was safe and well looked after. But it did mean that we continued to sell, and that was the most outstanding thing. Was that during that whole lockdown period, week on week, we were still seeing the sales come through, and they had dropped by about 30%. But by the time we came out of lockdown, they were back to pre-COVID levels pretty much within the first week. So there was pent up demand. I think, like Lawrence touched on earlier, the biggest frustration and challenge that the customers I'm coming into contact with regularly is the lack of support they're seeing from banks and lenders moving through that application process quickly, and also the more preferential rates, which are probably more geared to the owner-occupier market.
Right, now there's something I'd quite like to get some response from Lawrence on. Yesterday, we saw a report from the Office of Tax Simplification essentially recommending that the government align income tax and capital gains tax rates. And it could be that the capital gains tax allowance is under threat, and that everybody, particularly landlords, will be paying an awful lot more capital gains tax to essentially refill the coffers which have been denuded by the pandemic. Lawrence, what do you feel? Do you see it as a real threat that there may be big reforms to capital gains tax?
I would always be slightly wary of any chunky tax exemptions that lose the exchequer a lot of money. And that's certainly one of them right now that looks like a big juicy prize for the Chancellor to pluck away. I think though you've got to remember that capital gains tax, you only pay tax on the money on the capital gain. That's the whole point. So if your property has appreciated in value and you benefited from that, then yes, you will face a liability. If your property hasn't appreciated in value, then you don't have to pay anything. So there is that element of risk mitigation there, in that you're only paying on any gains that you've made already. So in that sense, while it is potentially going to eat into some investors' profits, it shouldn't be such a large issue as many people seem to be fearing, where they're saying, well, it's going to eat away all my, you're not going to get taxed on the wholesale value of your home, just on the amount that it's gone up, if it does go up.
So we've seen an assault on landlords by the government through successive tax changes. What else could they do to landlords, the government? Because as we keep stressing, the government is looking for money. Could they squeeze some more out of landlords, do you think? I
honestly wouldn't want to give them any more ideas. I think the big changes that we're likely to come through next that negatively affect landlords are less likely to be around tax and more likely to be about helping to professionalize the sector. We've already seen moves from the Ministry of Housing to enforce or to coerce landlords to allow pets in their properties, where previously they would have had the right to say, no, you're not getting a bloody dog in here. And I suspect we will see further moves to make it more difficult for landlords to, for instance, evict their tenants without giving a reason, or to otherwise gain possession of their property. So I think there's changes coming that will make being a landlord slightly less flexible, and could eat away into those returns a little bit. But I would imagine there's probably less more to do with the regulation than it is to do with the tax side of things.
Now, before we go on to the third plank of our discussion tonight, I'd just like to get some view from Danny on mortgages. We know that lenders are encountering huge delays because they've had to introduce social distancing into their home working. And so we're seeing an awful lot of delays in the approval of loan applications. But generally, Danny, are you finding that people are able to get the finance they want at the kind of rate they want, or are they encountering problems?
I would say the rates are probably the best that you're going to experience ever. Myself, I just remortgaged and I was so surprised at how cheap it was to borrow the money. But I don't think that the interest rates are really the major concern. The biggest asset, the biggest factor that we've experienced over the last couple of months has really been down to the loan to value. Those products that were on the market 3 to 4 months ago have been heavily slashed over the last couple of months. And we're definitely seeing lenders putting a lot more emphasis and onus into people with larger deposits. Therefore, it de-risks from their perspective. And it just means that it's a quicker turnaround from their side. On the slightly higher loan to value rates, they're definitely being a lot more stringent than they ever were previously as well. So it's not a bad thing. I think it protects everybody involved in the process. It's just everybody understanding what's involved now and adjusting accordingly. We've always worked to a process of 21 days to exchange contracts. Now that is a challenge in the current climate, with a lot of solicitors not working from home and working remotely, and also a lot of lenders working remotely as well, even to the extent surveyors, a lot of the surveyors have disappeared, or they're not working at the moment, they're still furloughing, and therefore that's having an impact on them being able to come out and value the property for the lenders as well, which has adds another layer to them having to wait. So it's just a case of, as long as everybody goes into the process with their open eyes and fully understanding what's involved, then I think everyone's fine. It's just when customers are very much used to being money so readily available.
It has been an extraordinary year, and I think everybody is willing to cut everybody else some slack. I mean, it is only just extraordinary that the property market bounced back as quickly as it did. and that people have found it, been willing to go and look and buy houses despite social distancing, despite PPE. It quite extraordinary. Now we've got some of your questions coming through, and there's some that I might actually try and answer later, because there's some complex ones about the Help to Buy loan from Margaret Shelter. We've got questions coming in about where is good to buy now. Keep on asking your questions, and if we can't get through to them now, we will try and answer them later, and Lisa will tell you how we're going to be able to do that. Okay, now I think we may have another poll that we can tell you the results of. So over to you, Lisa.
Okay, so our second question we asked you all was regarding buying off plan. So we asked, have you ever invested in or considered investing in a property off plan? So 58% of you said no, 42% of you said yes. So again, quite an even mix there, but more balanced towards the no.
Right, I wonder if we might just get a few views from our panelists on that very quickly on off plan. Lawrence, off plan, is it a good option now, or is it too risky?
I think, again, it will depend on the individuals involved. One of the great advantages with buying off plan is that it gives you the time to get your ducks in a row. So you have some visibility on when that property is going to be completed. You can arrange everything else so that everything is ready to move in on day one and get everything sorted out. You also got the prospect of if prices do rise, then you've managed to lock in a price at a lower value while the market has continued to appreciate. So there's some positive aspects to it there. Having said that, it does also mean that you've bought a property, or you've committed to buying a property, but you won't be able to move in for 6, 12, 18 months. And so there's less flexibility in that sense. And so it will all depend on the trade-offs for those individuals, which of those is more important to you.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. Danny, people coming round now, what's the feeling about buying off plan? Are people confident, or are they more wary at the moment?
I think you've got two distinct stalls in the current market. You've got one that is predominantly only looking for the stamp duty holidays. So they are looking for imminent completion next 5 to 6 months. That is their key driver. And that's predominantly owner-occupier. However, saying that, there are a few savvy owner-occupiers that are also selling because they think they're going to be selling at the top of the market and seeing if there's going to be any adjustments in the market over the next 6 to 12 months. Taking the risk, moving into rented. Hopefully they've sold at the best value, and then in 12 months' time, look to possibly buy it at a slightly reduced rate. And then you've got the owner-occupier, then you've got the investor market. And the investor market predominantly buys off plan, from my experience. The fact that they can stage their payments, they can have a lot more involvement in the designing of the internal units, bespoking it up and tailoring the apartment or the house themselves is a nice element of that customer journey. And then also, for example, Eden Grove is 3 to 4 years off plan for the first phase. Personally, I think that's a good time to be looking for completions coming through, because I think realistically over the next 12 to 18 months, the market's going to plateau. It's not going to go up. If anything, it may go down by a couple of %. And no one really wants to complete with what in effect would be negative equity. By buying something that's a little bit further off plan than what traditionally investors look at, which has traditionally been 18 months to 2 years, it allows the market to recover. And actually you should start completing when the market's on a recovery ride, which in effect should benefit you. And from our perspective as a developer, we have a signable contract. So even if a customer sees the growth coming with the next 18 months, 2 years, they can look to flip the property on and take the profit out of the unit by selling it on before it completes. Alternatively, if the market's still on an increase, they can hold on to it and wait till completion come through and look to do it at that time as well. So there's still two stalls to the market. And from that perspective, there's a bit of everything out there for everybody still.
Fabulous. Now, we've got a question in from Alison, who asks, what Do you think, I've got my glasses on, are the advantages and disadvantages for overseas buyers, especially mainland China and Hong Kong investors? What she's essentially asking is London a better place to buy than Manchester? Location is going to be the third and final bit of our big discussion, but I'm just going to ask Danny to come in now and make the case for London, or maybe he might surprise us by saying Manchester's the place to be.
I'd love to say Manchester is the place to be, but I would be remiss in saying that. Having experienced the crash that happened last time around, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool were massively hit. The great thing about London is it's kind of like its own economy. It's very stable. And even when it did crash, it was a slight reduction, not a 30 to 40% reduction, which the Leeds, Manchester and Liverpool saw. What I would say, though, is central London, the yields are not as great. Going a little bit further outside London, especially now people are looking that further out. There's more renters coming into the market for outside London. The rental returns are a lot stronger. And where you may be able to buy one property in central London, you may be able to buy 2 or 3 outside London and actually spread the risk and make it slightly risk averse by doing that.
Now, I'm just going to ask Lawrence quickly on that one, because he's a man that believes in the reinvention and revival of cities, and that London will come back to what its past glorious self.
I absolutely believe that. But do you know what, Anne? I think London's past glorious self of around 9 months ago was a city where affordability was stretched almost to breaking point. And it was very difficult to see any further growth capacity in the London market, with first-time buyer deposits up at around £140,000 on average, helped significantly by the Bank of Mum and Dad in many cases. That doesn't particularly feel like a market that's got a lot of growth left in it. By contrast, those areas around London where affordability is less stretched, where you can still get into the jobs very quickly with a high-speed train, or if you want to drive, or if you want to telecommute and just do it from your kitchen table, you've got all those options available to you. Those areas have much greater price growth capacity, whether that's somewhere that's relatively close to London, or whether that's somewhere much further afield. I think the particular point, sort of thinking back to Alison's question on the overseas buyer angle to think about, is there will be an additional stamp duty surcharge of 2% coming on for buyers of UK property who are not domiciled in the UK for tax purposes. That arrives on the 1st of April 2021. So there may be some timing issues to work out there if you are buying from say China or Hong Kong. So something to consider there.
Thank you, guys. I'm feeling tremendously well informed, and I hope that you are too. Now we're coming on to the last and final chunk of our evening, which I hope you're enjoying, maybe with a cup of tea. My husband made me one earlier. Location, location, location is what property is all about. And I'd just love to get from Lawrence just some more facts about where's good to buy now, where's not so good, the unexpected areas that might perform very well, and then ask that question of Danny, despite his preference for Manchester.
Not that there's anything wrong with Manchester, of course. No,
I love Manchester, love Manchester. I wish we were having a great night out there just now.
I did say not Manchester, I said London.
Yeah. I mean, whichever. I think, if you want to look at what locations have the best prospects or the best locations to buy, it very much depends, again, on what you're looking to get out of that particular property. If you are looking to live there yourself and you want somewhere with a garden, you want somewhere with a lot of access to outdoor space, somewhere that's leafy and green, then clearly outside of London is going to be the place to go, unless you have the budget for somewhere that is overlooking Richmond Park. However, if you are looking for something that is always going to be occupied, that's going to provide a solid, stable rental income, then perhaps somewhere that's located in a town centre, not necessarily London. As Danny said, the yields are quite tight in London. Those rental returns not as strong, but in those regional towns or those commuter towns, locations that are very well connected, there you can expect to see solid and stable rental demand, helping to support those rental incomes there. And then finally, if you are just looking for if you're looking for somewhere with space to grow, again, outside of London, your money goes a lot further. whether that's if you're an investor looking to buy 2 properties instead of 1, or if you are a couple that's looking to have a child on the near horizon, looking for a property that's got an extra bedroom or 2, you are frankly going to get more for your money if you move away from those less affordable locations.
Well, thank you for that, Lawrence. Now, I'd just like to go over to Danny now. And one of the things I'm going to ask Danny about is, tell us more about Staines, Danny. Staines on Thames. I'm not getting the name.
Staines upon Thames, yes.
Staines upon Thames. Tell us more about it and why you feel that that's the kind of area that's going to prosper in future.
Well, one of the things that I hasten to add is Berkeley and the Berkeley Group has always bought sites in locations where we feel there's potential for growth and up and coming locations. And generally, Berkeley are usually one of the first developers to go into a regeneration location. And what will happen is we have a master plan, which we agree with the local councillors, to be able to also not only bring a new development which provide extra housing for the local area, but also integrate into the existing community and then be the benchmark for the area moving forward. So we take a lot of pride in what we do in terms of that groundwork before we even get to the point to launching the development. Staines upon Thames has definitely been one of those. If you look at the surrounding suburbs, the average purchase price of a house in the location is just under £1 million. They're very affluent areas, but Staines itself hasn't seen that growth in the market, probably down to the fact that it hasn't had hardly any regeneration over the last 10 to 15 years. Staines is also just on the steering committee at the moment, looking to gain Zone 6 accreditation. So it will also become part of Greater London from that aspect. So that will have a positive effect on the market. But there's not many places you can buy in London for a £330,000 apartment, which is 5 minutes to the Thames, 5 minutes to an established shopping centre, which has all the high street names and brands already there, and also has a train station that only takes you 30 minutes to get into Waterloo, plus you can get to Heathrow in 10 minutes. So from a Staines upon Thames perspective, it has a lot of positives in its armoury. And the fact that we're already bringing into the location extra amenities with a gym, a cinema on site, the co-working facilities, a concierge, it's very much a London style finish and product that we're bringing to the scheme. But equally, it's there to complement the location. So the gardens are open for all residents and external communities to be able to utilise, equally as long as the same with the shops. And it's really important that that whole community gels together. I was mentioning to you guys last time we spoke that we're now one of the only developers who do research 5, 10 and 15 years after we leave a project to ensure that the community engagement has actually knitted and gelled the way we want to. And that definitely helps with us then going into planners and local councils to be able to sell in a new development that we'd like to build for them.
So we hear an awful lot about placemaking, but that's actually what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Any developer can build a development. It is going that extra layer in terms of ensuring that the development that someone's buying into now looks the same in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And it's also thrived and benefited the local community. And that's really a massive driver behind our business as a whole.
Right. Now, what I'm going to do is we're coming towards the end of our time. I'm just going to ask each of you to give me a very quick view on something. We've got an awful lot of planning reform supposed to be happening. The government really wants to get more houses built. Lawrence, this time next year, do you think that we will be on our way to getting all those new homes we're supposed to need, or will developers still be finding it difficult to produce the amount of homes they'd like to?
I think this time next year, we're probably going to be somewhat below our aspirations for housing delivery. We're probably likely to be somewhat below where we were this time last year. But I do think the foundation has been laid to accelerate housing delivery, both in those planning reforms you mentioned, but also with a much more robust level of acceptance from people that we do need to build these homes. And NIMBYs not in my backyard turning into YIMBYs, yes, in my backyard, yes, we want more housing delivered in our area. So that, I think those views are changing, and that will help to accelerate that housing delivery coming forward.
So is that, do you feel that sense amongst people, Danny, that people are more accepting of the need to developer and more understanding of your problems when you want to put up something like you're putting up in Staines?
It definitely, there's definitely more acceptance in it, but I would say a lot of the existing residents are just very hesitant and reluctant to go with any developer, and they have a lot more say and contribution and input into that building and planning process than they ever have had previously. So we are definitely seeing customer input and engagement is probably the most important thing before we even launch a development. We have a development coming up in Osterley where we've spent the last 12 months in a porter cabin where residents can come in, local community come and ask questions. We can answer some information and give them a little bit of a glimpse as to what the vision is for the location. And it's about working together. We're a property developer, we're very good at it, but when we don't know everything, and we can always learn from each individual that comes through the door. Some of them are quite out there ideas, but some of them are very, they're correct and they're right for the location. They know their location better than us at the end of the day, and they know what works and they know the people that live there. So it's very important to us to take them on that journey with us and ensure that they've got buy-in from day one. And so Staines upon Thames has been very similar to that. The local residents, the local council have been an integral part of ensuring that the development is delivered, released all at the same time to ensure that A, they're not saturating the market. They've got plans for more and further developments to come through in future, and ensure that the local community really does engage with us.
Right. Danny, thank you for that. Working together, wouldn't that be great if that was the motto? And that's how we're going to try and end this evening. I'm going to say thank you very much for shedding so much light on what's happening now in the housing market. And I'm going to go over to Lisa, who will be able to explain how you can find out more and pose any more questions. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Anne, for joining us tonight. So we've had loads of questions tonight, which is great. I'm sorry we didn't get through everything. What you can do is take a look at Berkeley's Eden Grove website. So if you Google Berkeley Eden Grove, you'll be able to find information there on how to ask those questions, get in touch with the team. We will also be sending out a Zoom link following this session, and using that link, you can actually request your investor pack. And again, a great place to get in touch with the team, find out more about what we've talked about today and ask your questions. As I say, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you to the panelists, and we hope to see you again at another webinar in future. Take care. Good night.